What's up, and welcome to Place of Assembly podcast, produced by H0L0 NYC in partnership with Experimental Sound Studio Chicago and 8-Ball Radio. I am joined today by co-host Huang of Awesome Agency Asia, and we're going to be speaking with DJ Shannon. Alan, what's up? Put us on, man. Who's DJ Shannon, and what's good with you?
How's it going? Yeah, DJ Shannon. Shannon is a promoter and DJ who I had gotten in touch with when she was living in Chongqing, which is like the western part of China, Sichuan province. And we're talking about like Chengdu and Chongqing, I guess, today. So I thought she'd be a really good person to talk to because when I rent tours and I talk to people in Shanghai and all the other cities, and I have like an artist, and they're maybe not so like pigeonholed into like a certain genre or something. They're like, oh, you should talk to Shannon. She does a lot of like, she's like trying to do a lot of like cool stuff out there. Like that's interesting and experimental. And she reached out to me actually like officially a few years back when I had an artist that she was like super interested in. And it was like, oh, you really like this person? That's cool. Like you seem like a person who's kind of in the know all these things. And so I always wanted to talk to her. Western China's been like a super interesting like specifically Chengdu and Chongqing with like what's happened in the last few years, specifically with hip hop. So I wanted to get her take on that. And I think she's back in America. So I want to see how that's all developed because of COVID and all this other stuff. So yeah.
All right, man. I'm excited for it. Let's get into it. DJ Shannon. What's up?
Yo.
How is everybody?
Good. The best that I can be during this time, I would say.
Yeah, I hear that. I hear that. Alan, how are you?
I'm doing really good. I got some green screened coffee. You can not see it, but it's there. There.
Amazing, because Alan is in Taipei and it's a morning hang, and Shannon and I are in New York City and it's a night hang.
Yeah, international we are.
I like this. And it's actually the next day where you are.
Yep. It's the 17th right now.
Got it. Noted. All right, cool. Well, Shannon, Alan, welcome back to Place of Assembly. Alan's co-hosting another of these episodes focusing on China. And Shannon, welcome to Place of Assembly.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Excited to get into it. So first thing, I'm going to ask the Place of Assembly question. We're just going to dive into this, and then we'll, that'll open up lots of avenues of pursuit and inquiry. So the question is, what is the craziest or the most intense or ecstatic or complex, you see what I mean, event that you've ever been a part of where you had some kind of responsibility to the event? So not that you were just attending, you had some role, you were playing, you were the organizer, something like that. You curated it. So the craziest event that you've ever been a part of where you had a role in the event.
Ooh, that's a good one. I feel like there's so many of those experiences for me. But probably the most memorable night like that for me was in Chongqing, when we first kicked off our very first sound check party. So just to give viewers or listeners a little context, this was in 2016 when I was approached to throw one of the very first hip hop parties in Chongqing. Because at the time, the rap of China was kind of growing popularity. There was a younger generation of kids, local kids that were really into this trap hip hop sound. And I had a friend who owned this club called Echo Bay, asked me to come in and do and essentially curate a night. And it was at one point where I was just kind of like playing all these hip hop tracks where you start to see all these kids roll in with like, you know, the gold chains. I saw a do-rag or two. And by the end of the night, it just was packed with not only local Chinese kids, but like foreign kids. I mean, you name it. And things got so out of hand because the bar was like very, very small that we actually had to start like pushing some people out because we didn't want the cops to come. So, and then, you know, maybe you have a couple of drinks here and there. You're still trying to keep everything and manage the chaos. So that night was really, really, really memorable for me.
Amazing. And you're saying that, will you say the name of the place where that took place again?
It's called Echo Bay.
No, the province or the area.
Chongqing, yeah.
Say one more time.
Chongqing.
Chongqing. Okay, cool. I just want to, you know, not be messing this up entirely. And you're saying that was the first like rap hip hop party in that area? Very
first hip hop party, yeah. So
ever,
yeah.
That's wild, man. Mm-hmm. So why would it have been that would have been the first ever hip hop party? But is there a particular reason why, since between 1979 and the present, they wouldn't have had one hip hop party?
I mean, that's a really great question. I mean, I'm sure there were hip hop parties going on, but not to the level where we were kind of organizing them. Because at the time, you know, I think at the time when I first came to the city, Chongqing was very much so, you know, still kind of developing. And when I would go out with friends for a night on the town, it was mostly like to these like real commercial tech, like top 40 clubs where they're playing like, you know, kind of annoying big room music, you know? So to go out and hear trap music or, you know, boom bap playing was, you know, kind of a rarity. And at the time, that's when I was kind of getting my chops, learning how to DJ. My friend who owns the club, Echo Bay, would let me come to the club, you know, on a night where there wasn't so much going on. And I would learn to just kind of play around with all these different sounds that I was listening to at the time. And a friend came over to me and was pretty much like, hey, I really love the stuff that you're playing. How about we just start a night where we could play a whole bunch of hip hop or all the things that they're not playing at some of the big clubs? And so I was like, okay, but do you think people are actually going to like it? And when we did that party, that's when the wheels kind of started turning in my head, where I was like, okay, this is not just a night. This is a place where people actually want to come and have a really cool cross-cultural exchange and be a part of something. So that's what really kind of spawned those 2 years of doing that hip hop party.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And so then that became something that you were doing in that area.
Yeah. For 2 years, we would throw this party monthly. And we just started to see like a different wave of kids, both local and foreign, come every time. And, you know, it kind of shifted from initially doing just a hip hop night to then experimenting with other sounds like global bass, you know, Baile Funk, you name it. And every time people would really love to come to these nights. Eventually, we started kind of reaching out to some of the local rap crews in the scene. You have MX, who's just an incredible MC, who is also on the Rap of China, and a really, really cool gang called Wave Music in Chongqing that were just putting on these like stellar rap battles. And so we would invite these crews to come and play, you know, every month. And then that started bringing in another wave of community. And so we really started to see this beautiful, like harmonious blend of, you know, putting together what was happening with Asian hip hop culture and all these avant-garde scenes, and many of them together what's happening in America essentially. So that's really the joy that I took in doing those nights, was really having those kind of cross-cultural experiences. Because, you know, my Chinese is good, but it's not necessarily the best. But there's something about music that really brings people together, right? You don't necessarily have to understand what each other is saying, but there's a certain level of communication that comes through music. And I really love to see those experiences happen when we had those nights. Yeah.
Amazing. So Alan is like, obviously active as a booker. Is this an area that you're familiar with as a booker?
I've done a couple things out in Chengdu with the more like techno side of things. But I've also traveled through it as a tour manager a couple times. And my last time I was there, NASA was still around.
Yeah.
And that whole complex, which is like super interesting. We should definitely talk about in a minute. But I love hearing about, I haven't been to Chongqing, but I've heard a lot about it just from the hip hop scene. I'm friends with a lot of the people who do the hip hop stuff in the mainland. And yeah, just like I watched Rap of China and I know a little bit about it, and just I wanted to learn more about kind of like how the stories definitely match up to the physicality of the space, right? Like hearing that this is like the first official hip hop party, which kind of makes sense to me because, I hear about the influence Rap of China had kind of on bringing that to like a mainstream. Like I can imagine them having these like gatherings where they, cipher or rap, because there definitely was hip hop in Chongqing for a while, right? Because you have like Guy and all the kind of big guys who went to Rap of China, they were doing something there, right? But until Rap of China came out, it probably didn't seem like a thing you could put in a club and like have it be successful at all. And now after Rap of China, now is like a thing that people who didn't like necessarily know about hip hop before could come and experience and have a good time with, and thus you could have some parties. So that was like kind of a general understanding, and it was great to hear the Shannon throwing the first real hip hop parties in Chongqing. That's like kind of mind blowing to me because it's just such a huge city for that.
Yeah.
At this point, like I think most people who don't know anything about China and know the name Chongqing know it because of hip hop.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So as I told you before we started recording, I'm going to ask a lot of super basic questions. So what is Rap of China?
I'll take this one, I guess. Rap of China is a reality TV show started in China. It's modeled after a Korean reality TV show where they take a lot of unknown ciphers, rappers, put them all together in competition with some celebrity judges, and they all battle each other, rap battles, some sort of conditions over a series of a season. And then one is crowned the winner. And usually the winner goes on to do very big things like act or be on TV a lot or put out a record or whatever. But I think what for Rap of China, what represents to China is like the first real mainstream offering of hip hop in China.
Right.
Because before then it was like very subculture. Not like subculture in that like no one knew about it, because like they would throw these kind of like super lit parties, at least in Chengdu, and you could definitely feel like people knew about hip hop or playing hip hop in some places. But I think what that did was codify it for a very mass audience and injected, for better or for worse. And we can talk about that in a bit too, because that was super interesting what happened. A lot of commercialism into hip hop, which had an immediate what's the word? Backlash. Had an immediate backlash pretty much right after that show ended.
Well, let's just spill that tea now. So both of y'all, like, I'm curious about this.
I think Shannon should take this one.
I mean, hopefully I can. Well, I mean, at that time you had a lot of censorship going on, right, in China, and Alan had mentioned Gosh is huge. I mean, they're from Chongqing. You have guys like Guy and K11 that are just really big on the scope for the city in terms of hip hop music. But I think around that time, I'm not sure exactly what year that was, but I think Guy had started using some really controversial lyrics in some of his songs to the point where he kind of got banned. Like he couldn't rap. A lot of his songs were starting to get taken off of like NetEase and all the big Chinese streaming platforms. And at one point, that's kind of like maybe like 2018, where we actually had to sit down as organizers, me and my buddies, and be like, maybe the hip hop stuff, we need to tone down on it a little bit because of all the censorship that's going on. And slowly at that time, we started to see, the crowds of our parties kind of dwindle a little bit because there was so much gray area going on in terms of that. But yeah, then we spawned into something totally different, which I'll tell you guys about later. But there was a lot of controversy with hip hop kind of taking off into this mainstream realm for sure.
Yeah, just with an increased profile came like an increased amount, like an insane amount of scrutiny.
Yeah.
Which is kind of normal, I think, in China, in mainland China, because it's just like anytime anything becomes at all popular and more importantly monetizable, the government will just like go in and just be like, what is this? We don't understand this. Is this good? Is this bad? I don't know. Let's censor it for now, maybe, and then let's see what we can do about it.
Interesting. So when you say that the organizers had to sit down and say, maybe we should tone this down a bit, like how did that find expression, and why exactly? I mean, this is another basic question in the sense, because I could speculate, but like I don't want to speculate. So
by the way, I don't want, like, I don't know if you're trying to go back to China, Shannon, or something like that. So don't be afraid to be like, we can't talk about this.
That's exactly kind of where I was going with that.
Don't be afraid to be like, I can't talk about this. I'm not trying to like do some. Yeah.
Word. I second that. Yeah. I mean, I'm on the outside of this. So yeah.
I ain't trying to get anybody banned from going back.
Right. Okay. Well, the question was, and you can, take this however you want to take it, even if you just want to pivot or whatever. Like, how did it, what was the vibe like? We should be less aligned with this content because it's getting so hot that we want to take a couple steps back from it, for essentially for our sake and for the sake of the community, to not like implicate people.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty much what it was. I mean, we started to see these like big hip hop guys kind of essentially like disappear. Right. So, that was a little bit of a red flag for us, and us as foreigners, there's a certain line, a thin line that you have to walk as a foreigner in China. And so, we just kind of thought it would be safe to, not throw the parties on such a large scale that we were doing, because we were bringing in like 250, almost 300 people every time we would do these events, like packing out the space. So we thought, let's taper down a little bit. Maybe we do something here or there, but not on the scale that we were doing it. And that's when things kind of, started to taper off, and we didn't have that same momentum that we had starting out initially.
Okay. And so then you said, so you sort of morphed it into something else. So what did that become?
Yeah. So in 2018, we threw our last sound check party, and a buddy of mine that had been helping me to organize these events was like, well, hey, I really want to keep this going. Like, how do we do that? And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, you tell me. And maybe a week later, he came back to me and was like, how about we put our money together and open up a club? And I was like, wait a minute, a club? Like, no, we can't do that here. And he was like, yeah, I mean, we have all the resources, we have a group of people that come to our events religiously. We've got connections with, different local buddies of ours that could help us with the paperwork. Like, why not? And so, I just, like I always do, I'm just kind of like flying by the seat of my pants. I'm like, all right, well, I've got this money together. Like, let's just see what happens. So slowly we started to build this concept for a hip hop club. And, we went through, did the paperwork and whatnot, found the space, which ended up being right near Echo Bay, like 2 doors down. And we decided to name it Cream Club. And we really wanted it to be this continuation of Soundcheck, right? This place where you could experience these really incredible hip hop tracks, but also find out more about other genres like the Baile Funk or global bass or whatever have you. And our first night that we opened, I remember this so vividly. This was on, I think it was July 18th. And the first night that we were open, all the power cut off. And we had like 200, maybe like 300 people waiting to like hear some hip hop and go crazy. And all the freaking lights cut off. We had no water, nothing running. So here I am running around frantically trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we reschedule this event? So we got our shit together pretty much. And the week later, we decided to open up again. And that's when like a whole floodgate of people came in, and it was just incredible, right? Like, I think on the opening night, Alan, are you familiar with Harry Carey?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had Harry Carey open up. Who else did we have? We had Wave Gang, a lot of the local crews come through. And it was just an incredible night. And again, slowly we started to see those people return, really eager to get back into that same kind of vibe that we were bringing with the sound check parties. And that's what we did essentially.
Okay, amazing. And so wait, why did the power and the water go out on the first night?
That's a good question. We still don't know to this day. I think maybe we had some like dodgy electricity situation going on. I mean, it was like an old restaurant prior, so it really wasn't set up to be a club initially. Like, we had to put like a lot of money in to get everything sorted out. And it was like a small, so essentially you walk in, it's like a little small lounge area, and then you walk upstairs and you have like a fairly decent sized dance floor. But yeah, I think it's just from like all the construction that needed to be put in. They didn't do it properly, probably.
Okay, and so then wait, so how long did you run that club for?
A year. So it's wild to think about how much we were able to jam pack into 1 year. Like, we brought a lot of really incredible talent through the doors. We had Anti-General, who's a really, really incredible dark trap DJ from, I think he's from Chengdu, yeah? We had MX, we had Didi Han, who's an incredible DJ from Korea. Gosh also did a secret show at the venue, which was wild because that was a lot of people. We probably had like damn near 1,000 people show up like continuously throughout the night and have a good time with us. And who else? Man, I Speak from Russia came, Kino Beats and Key and Keisachi, who are incredible rappers from Atlanta, came. I mean, I think one of the most exciting things was just being able to put Chongqing on to all this incredible talent, because no one was really taking in these people at the time, you know? Like, my buddy Bram, who was still running Echo Bay at the time, was like, well, we really can't cater to this kind of talent because we're a techno club, but I get all these hip hop acts and, you know, all these like avant-garde acts you know, in my email. We can't take them, but this is really great that you guys are hosting that here in the city, because the city needs it, you know? And sure enough, every time we would really usher in or welcome in this incredible community of people just really eager to listen to some new music that they didn't really have access to, you know?
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, that's like, I mean, running a club in New York City, as a New Yorker, is totally crazy. You have to be out of your mind to do it, honestly. But to go, you know, to China and run a club, you know, coming from New York. Are you originally from New York?
Yeah, born and raised.
Yeah. That's really something, man. Respect. That's amazing. So, okay, I'm gonna pivot a little bit. Speaking of clubs, Alan, you mentioned NASA.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about that. And NASA is, if I understood you correctly, is a place in Chengdu.
Yeah, it's a club in Chengdu.
Yeah.
In 2017, I did a tour manage with my friend Mark Rodito, who goes by Mark Rodito now. He used to go by Spaz Kid. And I just heard so much about when going to Chengdu, you just like hear about NASA. NASA was a spot. So NASA's closed now, along with everything else in that building. But NASA was basically in this like, so feel free to correct me, Shannon. That's why I'm very happy you're here, because I'm telling this all secondhand. They're trying to develop Chengdu as like a tech city, like a business city. So they built all these office buildings, and it really didn't take like with the Chinese people. So there was a lot of empty office buildings, and the builders who are on the hook for this, or the leasers on the hook for this, were like, we don't know what to do with this. But there were a bunch of kids who wanted to like open some clubs. So instead of like going to like a business district or like an underground district, they just opened their clubs in this huge office building, kind of in the middle of the business district. Like on the 20th floor, 20th, 21st floor, there's like 3 or 4 clubs in this one building. And so when you want to go to them, you go up the elevator and they're all just like, there's this, it like looks like a normal like apartment or office building. And you go up to the 20th floor and it's just a crazy mess, like insane mess. And they have their studio up there, and their club is actually 2 floors. They just knocked out the fucking ceiling on the 20th floor, and just like it goes up. And I like to explain it like, you remember the old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live action movie? Like the first one where they're in the suits?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
NASA kind of looks like when the first time you see like the Foot Clan's lair, like with the skate ramps and like the arcade machines.
Yes.
And everybody's just like, and there's like very young Sam Rockwell like trying to sell you Marlboros. Like that's what NASA felt like. It was very purple and blue and 90s like Hollywood set club with ridiculous amounts of they really love whippets.
That's the thing out there, man.
Yeah. Really love balloons. Really love balloons. First time I seen balloon service instead of bottle service.
Really?
Yeah.
Balloon service.
Balloon service. They give you a canister and they put like little sparklers in a bag of balloons on the table. I can talk about NASA because they're done, so I'm not it's not getting anybody in trouble, I don't think. But yeah, it was just like a wild scene. And then like you hear all the stories about Chengdu being like the center of like hip hop, even though I think Chongqing has just like so much to do with that too. But they're right next to each other, so people conflate the two a lot, I think, culturally. But yeah, you hear about it and then you go up and you're like, wow, okay, I kind of get it. I kind of get it why this is just like, because it's like on the west side of the country and it's not got so much scrutiny. At least it didn't have so much scrutiny compared to like Shanghai and Beijing and Hong Kong, Shenzhen. So they're just like kind of getting away with a lot of stuff, it felt like. But I think after Rapid China broke out and people understood that these internationally were such hubs of this growing popular culture, then these clubs got a lot of scrutiny as well. They got really looked at. All the crazy shit they were doing, they had to tone it way down, but it wasn't even enough. And like kind of, I think all the clubs in that building are out. And a lot of the owners of those places have opened new spots. But I have lost track of some things. I know Tag is a thing.
Yeah, Tag. I think Tag is still in the Poly Center, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Tag is still in the Poly Center. It's just NASA and Here We Go is another really incredible.
Okay.
There, yeah, I love
that. And that got out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Didn't the NASA people open a new spot?
They did, and I can't remember the name of it. They did open another one somewhere in the city, and it's cool. It was like a little dive bar.
I really hope like some like mainland guy is watching this and is like, this kid doesn't know anything about what he was talking about. I would love that's exactly what I want that to be written in a comment under the video later. Please call my shit out, because I'm piecing it together, and if you're trying to piece it together with memories of Chengdu, you're gonna have a lot of holes.
So okay, so wait, so like Shannon, was it like the center of the scene in Chengdu was like these office buildings with these clubs on the like 20th plus floor? That was sort of like the epicenter of what was happening.
It was just like this one office building too.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah,
and
it was like literally like this one floor, right? Like I remember one time I had went to the Poly Center, and at that time I think it was Here We Go was like 2 doors down from NASA, and then Tag was like I think on another floor. But essentially you had all these kids just like hopping, like party hopping from every floor and going to all these incredible clubs. And I think the first time that I went to the Poly Center was in like late 2016. And I was like, oh my God. It was around that same time that we had just started the sound check parties. And I was like, man, this is great. This city is so lively, you know? And I just had a ball. Like, there's something so energetic about Chengdu that you just can't really put your finger on, but you know, you just love coming back to the city time and time again, whether it be to experience the nightlife. The food is incredible. The people have a different swagger to them out there in Chengdu. It's just like, it's so hard to put in words, you know?
Okay, that's amazing. So wait, so like, I was gonna, well, I mean, things like this are like literally why I do this show, because like, it's so amazing, just like the vibes you can get to by how you use space. Do you know what I mean? Like, when y'all are talking about this, I'm reminded of, I was on tour in Eastern Europe and we were playing this minor city in Poland called Poznan. And we were trying to find the venue, and there was this old like East Bloc brutalist architecture building that looked like it was defunct. It was obviously defunct, like nothing was going on in there, but it looked like it was some type of governmental building. And it turned out that was the venue. And on the fourth floor of this venue, which was a former police station, like a Soviet era Poland police station, and then it was completely blown out, and you would go in, but the elevator was working, and you would take the elevator to the fourth floor, and on the fourth floor they had this like fully tricked out beautiful black box theater with like an incredible sound system and everything, and just like the vibe of that like discovery and that reveal, you know, it's just like, it's like a specific energy that you can only get to through the use of space, you know what I mean? And I just love hearing these stories, man, just like hearing about these places. So Shannon, tell us about your trajectory though. So you were back and forth between these two cities, or were you living in one but frequenting both? Or I don't know how close these two places are together. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Can you just sort of unpack that for us?
Yeah, for sure. So they're not super far from one another. You could literally take a train like an hour and 30 minutes and be in Chengdu in no time. So I was based in Chongqing. That's where I was teaching English, and that's where most of my nightlife organizing was going down. And eventually, as I started to network and meet people, I started making friends in Chengdu and found myself DJing at some of the parties out there. There's a really incredible crew who I'm just like, super close friends with to this day, called Swag Alien in Chengdu, that are doing like these incredible hip hop nights, or, like nights where they play all kinds of music. And those guys were really the catalyst to start bringing me out there and organizing my own events, essentially. Because when we started to kind of close things in 2019 with the club, I was like, okay, I want to keep doing this and maybe like start my own party label. So I started a party label called Drip in 2019. It was really kind of an extension of a radio show that I was doing at Chengdu Community Radio. And I thought to myself, oh man, like I could actually turn this into a party. So I did my first event in 2019 at a really, really cool venue called Funky Town in Chengdu. Have you heard of that, Alan?
No, I haven't.
Oh man, Funky Town is becoming legendary in the city. And the funny thing about Funky Town is it's literally the size of like a bathroom. It's so small, but they pack so many people in there, and it's just a bunch of kids just like vibing out to a lot of funk and disco. But eventually they started opening up the genres for like hip hop, and every time I would do an event there, the Swag Alien crew, I would just go nuts every time. So yeah, I was pretty much traveling back and forth and doing events.
Okay, word. And so did you ever play those office building clubs?
No, because at the time, so I think the Poly Center things kind of ended around 2017. So I was only going, I wasn't playing there at that time.
Ah, got you. Man, that scene sounds wild. So and okay, getting back to my original question though, NASA was one of the spaces in the Poly Center.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had the DJ and art collector DB Berkman on the show. Do you know who that is, Alan or Ed Shannon? He's
No.
like it's like a really like OG drum and bass inventor, kind of like credited with some degree of like I think what he's credited with is bringing drum and bass to New York.
Okay.
That's like, it's not so much like an innovative of the production style or something, but that he just kind of imported it to New York in the 90s and the early 90s, or actually in the mid to late 80s. And anyways, the reason I'm saying this is because he had this legendary party called NASA that was apparently like the premise for the Harmony Korine movie Kids. What was kind of like based on the vibe of this party that he did. It was called NASA. Anyways, I was wondering if there was some relationship there because he was also on the show, but who knows?
I think Chinese kids just love the idea of NASA.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. So my next line of inquiry is, Shannon, what got you over to China? Like, how did that even go down?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in 2016, I was just kind of at this crossroads in my life where I was like, nothing's freaking working here in New York City. I was doing like little odd jobs here and there, working at an online radio station briefly, but it just seemed like everything was falling through. So actually my sister a year prior had already went out to Chongqing and was just telling me so much about it and raving about it. And she sat me down one day and was like, listen, like things aren't panning out. Why don't you come out here with me and just see what Chongqing has to offer? And at the time, I remember looking at my bank account, like had only like $500 in there, didn't have so much going on. And I was like, you know what? It can't be worse than what I'm already going through, right? So let me just go out there and see what happens. And just to kind of set the scene for listeners, Chongqing is this incredible, like really beautiful city, kind of smack dab in the middle of the Jialing and Yangtze River. And you've got these like sprawling mountains and beautiful scenery. Kind of almost reminds me of San Francisco a bit. And I remember getting there and being like, oh my God, like I'm this Black girl here. What's going to happen? Eventually day to day, you kind of get your bearings, you learn the language, you start making friends. And that's really what happened. I just kind of immersed myself in the culture, and it just seemed like I started slowly attracting all of these really cool people interested in about what I was doing musically and interested to know more about me culturally. So that's kind of how it happened. It happened really naturally, I would say.
Okay. And you had no real intention of leaving. You ended up back here kind of estranged from China because of COVID.
Yeah. Honestly, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I would still be over there for sure. But yeah, I literally came here during the spring festival just to visit my family. And then the virus hit, and the school that I was teaching at the time was like, well, hey, you're pretty much in the epicenter of what's going on over there. Like, maybe you want to stay and, we'll try to mail you your stuff. And I literally didn't get my belongings until like 2 weeks ago. Like almost a year later.
Yeah.
Intense. And so, but like, I mean, you kind of already answered this question, but you were fixing on, you had no plans to come back. You were just steady doing your thing out there.
No, in fact, I was trying to start bringing artists from New York City and from over to start playing in Chongqing. Like, actually, me and Alan were trying to set up a show prior to, and then COVID hit and we couldn't even do it. We couldn't follow through.
That's how we met. She found me like looking for some artists to bring over, and I was like, but I had heard about Shannon before from some other people who were like, oh, you should definitely talk to Shannon about some shows in Chongqing or stuff. So you got a reputation. It's a good one. So I was just like, okay, we can talk to Shannon about Western China stuff. It's good.
Amazing. So let's get back to Drip. So then what happened with Drip? You started Drip at Funky Town.
Mm-hmm.
And then how long did that go on for? How did that develop? Like, did it stay at Funky Town? Like, and also tell us what the character of that night was. I mean, was it, more of the same? Was there a change in what you were working on, or
So we had that first event at Funky Town, and I had a DJ from New York come. Oh my God, I can't remember his name. It was a disco DJ. I think his name was Disco Paradise or something like that. But he came over and we did a two-city tour. So we did one at Funky Town in Chengdu, and then we did one at Echo Bay in Chongqing. And both are really great. And just based off of those two events, I was like, okay, well, I've got a knack for this, right? I used to own a club. Like, I've got a network of people that trust me enough to throw some events at their establishments. So I kind of kept it going. After that first event, then I did another one with Daniel Ness, who's a really, really incredible producer out of London, I believe. And he came over. We did a set in Chongqing, and I think he did like a multi-city tour, but he stopped in Chongqing. Chongqing has a really great long-standing venue called Nuts. And I was pretty much almost going to start working with them on a regular basis to book international talent. And then after that last event, I didn't know that that would be the last event that I would have for like almost a year,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, there's so many ways in which I want to follow up on this, but question for both of you. So when you're talking about doing, I mean, the way that I hear you talking about your parties, it sounds to me like they're more or less like open format, like what we would call in New York open format, because it's like, it's not just a Baile Funk party, or it's not just a trap party. It's like trap and Baile Funk and other forms of like global bass and music from the, from the States or from the African diaspora or Caribbean or like whatever. Like, what is, like, I know how that hits in New York. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But like, what is that like in China? Like in like, I guess like from an energetic point of view, like what's the level of familiarity with that music? Like even in New York, like New York a decade ago, if you were out on the scene trying to talk about like Kuduro or Azunto or some of the like deeper cut global bass, Gome, right? Nobody would know what you were talking about except for like heads. You know what I'm saying? So what is the resonance like in China? Like, is there like a head community for that there? I mean, I'm sure there is, you know what I'm saying? But I'm just generally asking the question, like, what's that dynamic like? You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And that was the most exciting thing, right? It was like, eventually I started touring in different cities and seeing what the scenes were like in different cities. And like, for example, Xi'an has a crazy nightlife scene, believe it or not. Like, there's a collective out there called the Boring Room, and they do a lot of open format parties. They're some of my like best friends, like Gianon, RVE, incredible people.
Wait. I'm sorry. It's called the Boring Room.
Boring Room. Yeah,
that is sick. That is a great name for a venue.
Yeah. So yeah, they're an actual collective, and their thing was like, kind of similar to what happened with us in 2016. There's no club in the city playing these really incredible kinds of music. Why don't we all bring our buddies together who like the same things and just throw a night? And so that's really the emphasis for the Boring Room in Xi'an. And I started doing some things with them out there, like doing some parties that went really well. And then I was traveling to other places in the, around China, like Shanghai. You mentioned the Shanghai Community Radio. That whole collective has an incredible depth of, that crowd likes all kinds of different music. You also have the Subcult crew. Subcult is becoming a really like popular label internationally for this very left field sound that's coming from a lot of the producers in Shanghai. So it was really interesting to kind of see what I was doing in the city and see how the local communities around China were like expanding on this really, really beautifully, and how we were all able to kind of work together harmoniously,
Right.
Yeah.
Alan, what's your experience of that? Like, in terms of these forms being like, brought out. I guess, I mean, part of what I'm wondering is like, when you're presenting this music, is it like you're presenting it to connoisseurs, or is it like you're presenting it to, people who are kind of discovering it for the first time? Or I imagine maybe it's like a mixture of both, or like, is it just like SoundCloud is everywhere, so just like everybody knows about everything, and so it's like it's not really like so surprising?
So for me personally, and I'm gonna try to tie it into Shan's experience a little bit, in that, like, I came to Taiwan like 4 years ago. I started throwing parties here, whatever, and talking to people. There's definitely heads out here, right? There's people who have traveled internationally, gone abroad and studied, or been part of other scenes. Like the guy who runs Final is a guy who like grew up in London, and the guys who run Pawn Shop, they grew up outside too, just like people like that, right? So there's heads who have like the experiences that might be more particular to a person in London or LA or New York for sure. But what we're all like hoping, and I think what maybe Shannon's also trying to do too in Western China, is that these scenes, as far as approaching dance music, club music, and like techno, are fairly new compared to where we come from. And so there's like kind of not an established form yet, right? And so what we're doing is we're taking the opportunity to do open format, because there is no established idea of what's open format or not. And we can bring kind of all these flavors to it and see what sticks, or see what kind of communities we can build up, or see like the ebb and flow of it. Really, it's always really interesting to me to try something like it's like if I play like a couple Vogue tracks in a set and I see a kid out there in the middle like actually knowing the dance to it, because there's one kid who knows, who's watched a bunch of YouTube videos on like ballroom dance or whatever. That's like super exciting to me, right? And there's no reason why that kid out there shouldn't be dancing like that at an open format event, because there's no like, this is techno or this is house, and this is not what we do at these parties. You do that at those parties. Like there's no delineation yet. The delineations on like techno and house, of course, are here because those people have been here in Taiwan for a long time and doing it for a long time. But there's a lot of like nitty gritty that isn't here yet. And even if people don't know what GOM is, you can play it. And if you play it in a way that makes sense as a DJ, and that's kind of like what my DJ style is kind of morphed into. You try to make things make sense to people who don't know anything about it, right?
Right.
Yeah, and you just like play it in a way that makes sense. You kind of lead them by the hand sonically. So like, you like that one? Well, you like this one. And this, you kind of dance them the same way. So just keep doing what you're doing. It's fine. You don't need to know the names. You don't need to know where it's from. Just dance to it, right? That's like the idea.
All right, cool. Yeah, well, that was illuminating. It's
I mean, I'd like to hear Shannon's take on it too, like if that's what she's experiencing there. But I feel like that's what a lot of, especially when you're not in, like, you can't do the same thing you do in Chongqing as in Shanghai, because Shanghai you're gonna run into way more heads. Right. They're gonna know way more about what they're doing. There's way more delineation. There's way more people who be like, that's, you can't play that. Or like, oh, I know that. Oh yeah, we've been listening to that for like 2 years now.
Yeah, right? That's exactly what it was,
Yeah.
You would go to some of the larger cities and, people would kind of be hip to it already, but there was a level of excitement of being able to bring these new sounds to a place like Chongqing, where these genres were like kind of starting to pick up a little bit. And then running into other people that shared that same kind of mindset, like, oh, I love ballroom. Like, we don't get to hear ballroom at clubs. Like, this is really cool. Why not incorporate those into sets, or even dedicate a night to ballroom, which was what I was trying to do before I left, for sure.
Right. Yeah. No, this is like super interesting to me about like the difference between Chengdu and Shanghai, where Alan, like what you're describing as this kind of leading exercise where it's like, you don't need to know what this is, like just trust me, come on this journey with me, and you're like kind of introducing people to new sounds, and there's some heads out there too, but it's like, maybe dominantly an exercise of like having faith in the DJ and just opening to the experience. Do you know what I mean? And then you go over to this other market where it's more steeped and people like know the tracks and they're like, oh, we know this one. Yeah, that, you can't play like a footwork track after a whatever other type of production style. You know what I mean? Just some type of DJ snobbery nonsense. You know what I mean? And it's like the thing is that it's like the energy of that like discovery dynamic is actually like a sicker vibe.
Mhm.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, I mean, Alan has been on a few of these with me, and he's and like there are certain things that I tend to harp on, and one of them is that the major markets are suffering because of shit like this. Do you know what I'm saying? Because that we're like so oversaturated with people who just know like every track and like blah, 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 you know what I mean? And it leads to this kind of like people like siloing off into like, well, I'm this kind of thing, and like I have this like hyper refined take on like exactly how this should be done. And it's like that shit is, I mean, I get that, and there is a beauty to expertise, right? There is a beauty to that like nuanced level of critical engagement with a medium and just like going deep, you know what I mean? But like it's also just like, dude, come on, man. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like just let these people fucking play whatever they want to play and like let these other cats dance, you know what I mean? But it's like, yeah, I don't know, when I'm hearing you talk about going from Chengdu to Shanghai, it just brings that up for me, how it's like you were in this kind of magical moment with this place where you were able to participate in this exercise of discovery with these communities, and it sounds brilliant,
But it's also funny because China, there's so many people, so it's like even if we're talking about like a place that like, oh, it's nothing like Shanghai, there's still a shit ton of people in fucking Chengdu, Chongqing, like a shit ton, right? Just like I'm in Taipei now, and there's like, it's like not even what how many people are in like Chengdu, Chongqing? Like what? It has to be north of 10 million, right? Yeah. Shanghai's 24 at least. Chongqing said Taiwan is like 6.
Oh wow.
Right.
Whoa.
So like you can be very exploratory on the western side of China and still get like throw a humongous party. The spaces don't get bigger. Your spaces are still 200 people big. Right. But you just have a shit ton more people to like cast a net out for. So that's like super exciting for a lot of people. And I think that's like why the party scene, I think in general in China, is actually pretty good, is because there's just a lot of things coming up and going away and coming up and going away, for whatever reasons. And that's why we're doing the cast and talking to people to find out what reasons. And everybody's got different reasons, and it's great.
So you're saying that because of the sheer size of these cities, that actually like informs the dynamic of the parties, because you can just cast this like super wide net and there's just so many people to reach.
Right. Because like the difference between like, in America, you have the idea of like a small town. Right. But a small town is actually small, right? Like south of 1 million people. In China, you can have small town attitude, but with like San Francisco sized population.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, actually.
Which is great, which is kind of the best of both worlds, right? You don't want like if you have the huge town, big, like I love Shanghai and it's great, but you go there and you're just like, God, it's so Shanghai here, right? You're like, oh, everybody's going to this party, everybody's going to that party, it's all just so flat and established, right? It's just, this is where you go, this is where you go, this is where you go. Who are you? You're new. Good luck, right? When you're out in the West or like in these cities that are coming up, there's still just a shit ton of people, but everybody's like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Who's doing what? What's going on? This is new. Let's go check it out. Like there's this like inherent curiosity. There's just like people wanting to put their time somewhere, and it's like great.
For sure.
I'm sold. I love that, man. I love that. Yeah. I mean, Alan, you've heard me say this so many times now. I'm not even gonna repeat myself anymore. But like, yeah, dude, that just that hungry vibe, man. Just that like trying to come up, man. It's so much more inspiring, than just this. I mean, like, yeah, just like coming from New York, just this like sitting back, like, just having some take
Right.
on everything and shit. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
even in New York, it comes and goes, right? You had your like Todd P years where you'd be throwing like weird shit in like Chinese restaurants and stuff, and that was like somewhat interesting for a time, right?
right. Well, that's a really interesting example, actually, because what Todd did, like I mean, this is we're like I said before we even started recording, like this was we can go on tangents, so I'm allowing myself to go on this tangent, but
Please.
like when I got to New York, man, like it's not like Shannon. Well, you're in New York for COVID, but anyways, like even so, there's a lot going on though. Do you know what I mean? Like even you can tell in its own COVID way, you can tell there's a lot of people out there trying to do a lot of stuff. Do you know what I mean? And like in normal regular times, there's so many clubs, there's so many radio stations. It's just like, it's like honestly a little oversaturated. You know what I mean? When I moved to New York, man, like when I was 18 in 1996, like, and 18, 19, 20, man, I didn't know how I was going to get a gig. Like it seemed insurmountable. It just seemed like I would go to the Knitting Factory. I would go to, well, Tonic came later, but I would go to all these clubs and stuff, and just the path from here to there, like from like being like a hungry youngin trying to like do what I was watching people do up on stage and actually getting to be that person on stage, just seemed literally just like, how will I ever do this? Do you know what I mean? Like I just couldn't figure it out, and like what Todd did was kind of in response to that, was because the scene was like very locked up. Like every venue was like very locked up. They had their relationships with their people that they booked. The scene was also like, of the people who were actually out playing, was a lot older. It was like a lot of people in their 30s and 40s and stuff. Like the kind of out jazz thing was like really big at that time. Like John Zorn was like, that was like really his heyday. And like, if you were like 20, like nobody gave a fuck about you. They were like, fuck out of here. Like I've been in New York for 25 years getting this shit together. Like, why am I going to help you out? You know what I mean? It was really like that, like it for real. And like what Todd did was just came and just walked the streets of Brooklyn and Queens and just went into spaces and found Mexican restaurants and Polish dive bars and community centers and churches that had some sort of faculty for producing a concert. Like a church might have a PA, because they have events sometimes, or like a Mexican restaurant might have a PA because they have like live bands every now and then or whatever. And he would go find these places and be like, hey, like, I'll put on a show here. Like, can I use your space? Like, you get this, I'll take that, like whatever. And just made deals. This dude must have made deals with 25 different spaces. So in a period of like 2 years, it went from there was nowhere to play unless you were like really connected, either through like some upper level music shit or through the art world or something, to there was like 25 venues. Do you know what I mean? And like the reason I think this is a relevant story to tell is because what you're saying is true, Alan. You can have these moments of discovery and opening in major markets when something really aberrant happens. Do you know what I mean? Because right. That floodgate opening, and like everybody that had some weird thing they were working on got to go out and play a show. It did have this like really effervescent, like overflowing kind of energy and this like attitude of openness and discovery. And yeah, it was really special. And it actually lasted for a really long time. And in many ways, I don't want to be too dark and like dour and shit. Like in many ways, New York is still like that. Like you discover amazing shit all the time in New York.
Sure.
And you have to be a really open and creative and curious person to live here, or else you'll hate it. You know what I mean? But I do admire when I go to places like Chengdu. I haven't been to Chengdu, but I've been to places that I, where I identify these qualities in those places. I always admire that quality.
Yeah, I think the entirety of China is just like on that kind of post Todd P level, either towards the tail end or the very beginning of it at one point. Just even, I think right before COVID hit, they were kind of reaching that peak.
For sure.
And now we'll see post-COVID what happens, but they're already starting to party for sure out there, and it's kind of like coming back, and you're seeing like the old wave of these spaces close up. Beijing just closed a lot of spaces. They're old techno scenes. But what we're going to see is going to be still a lot of people hungry for those. Those weren't not successful spaces. They're just being closed because of government shit and development. Right. And so you're going to see a lot of people opening new things just because it's going to be such a good business plan to do so right now. And we'll see in New City, though, Shannon talked about Xi'an just having a crazy scene. And that's just people wanting to have what other cities have, right? That's just like, I went to Chengdu the other weekend. It was lit. Let's just do that here. Why not? So you're going to see that spread around. And because of the amount of people that are just like kind of everywhere, you're going to see a lot of success happening in spaces that aren't identifiable as like, oh, it should happen here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it should happen there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very wide open.
Well, that's what happened in America at the same time that you're talking about. It was like these vibes were sparking off in New York and DC and Portland and San Francisco and Olympia, had these kind of Chicago had these kind of legendary scenes, but then like every place had some version of that, like we're talking about back in the aughts, right? Like, Akron, Ohio and Denton, right. Texas.
Yeah, this actually is more reminiscent of, I'd say, like alternative wave, like late 90s than even like anything that's happened in the aughts in America.
Right. Right.
Man. From like zero to 60 kind of things.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing, man. That's amazing. So, all right, this is like, I'm having a hard time like conducting the podcast because I'm just so interested in just like going to these places, but no, that's like truly exciting and fascinating. But so Shannon, like back to just you in general, like all right, so you got back to New York. So what's your next move? Are you going back to China? Do you think you're going to stay stateside, or like what's it looking like?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'm going to just stay stateside for now. I think there's just so much going on and so much gray area about this pandemic that it's probably good for me to just be close to home. But for now, I mean, I'm still DJing. Like, I've been really utilizing Twitch as the platform to, keep DJing, build a little fan base online, and also use that to connect now with some of the DJs here in New York City. I think like before we started, I was just saying I'm going to do a set for 8 Ball on Sunday, which is going to be great. I'm doing a 2-hour takeover for DJ Steve's show, which should be cool. And then, yeah, I've got some really cool online radio station mixes coming out in the next couple of months. And I also do a podcast too, actually. It's called Club Management.
And oh yeah, that was you. Okay, because I saw you had Bergsonist on there recently.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, okay. And I picked up that you had something to do with it, but I wasn't sure if you were like a guest.
No, that's my podcast.
Your pod. All right. So wait, so tell us about Club Management.
Yeah, so I started that in China because I was just so amazed by all these incredible people I was meeting in the scene. So I was like, why not just like document my experience through a podcast? So I essentially started kind of reaching out to some of the club owners to interview them about how they're really putting on for their community through music. And we did a bunch. We've got like 40 episodes so far. So we did one with The Boring Room. We did one with Yang Song and Hui Yuan from Oil Club in Shenzhen, which is like becoming a huge place for a lot of international talent to come and perform. And we did one with Michael Olson from Dada Club, which is also a really popular club. They shut one down in Shanghai, but I think they still have it in Beijing. Yeah.
And they opened a new one, didn't they?
Oh yeah, in Kunming. Yeah, right.
Michael.
So, yeah, I love that guy. He's so great. So yeah, I pretty much started this to just kind of document my experience and really tell people about all the incredible music scenes that are developing out of China, for sure.
Cool. But now you're not focused solely on China.
No, now I'm starting to kind of piece together what's happening here in New York City. I think it's really been interesting to be away because I lived in China for 5 years. So it's been interesting to be away and then come back to this scene that's kind of bubbling now. Not so much with COVID, but before COVID, I was like going to Bossa Nova Civic Club a lot to see Push Jones and DJ Swisha and all that crew. So it's been really interesting to document what's going on with like the Brooklyn techno scene. We actually had Chris Jones on the show not too long ago, where he talked about, you know, his influences and what he's trying to do with this New York jungle sound. So I'm really, really looking forward to diving into what's happening with the music scene here in New York.
Yeah, I mean, Kush Jones is amazing.
Yeah,
definitely somebody we've had. I mean, Kush Jones has played Hollow like 20 times.
wow.
And super sick and also great person.
Mm-hmm.
Word. So that's cool. So you're fixing on just digging in here.
Yeah, for now. I mean, I can't wait to actually go back to China and tour. Like, it'd be nice to go back and see all my friends, tour around to different cities and play. But right now, everything's kind of shut down because of the virus, and I'm just kind of waiting for things to open back up so I can head out there and do like a nice little like multi-city tour for a couple of weeks, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I share that ambition, though I have less traction. But but I definitely, you know, that's I feel you. So I have a question that's kind of a follow-up on like everything we've talked about, or encompasses like a lot of what we've talked about.
Yeah.
So both of you are describing these scenes that like just hearing about from the outside just are so compelling and like so, I don't know, it just sounds like magical. Do you know what I mean? Like what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And Alan, you were talking about this like 0 to 60 vibe, like alternative wave, and this kind of it sounds like it's like this thing that's like growing and that's kind of like indefatigable or like irrepressible or something like this. And then earlier we were talking about this situation where the one of the rappers you were talking about, I don't think it was Gosh, but the dude who started using the really controversial lyrics.
Mm-hmm. Guy.
Right. Got kind of like curtailed and shut down, and then you guys got kind of spooked about that, and then people wanted to take a step back from it, and you saw the audiences dwindle. It is there, without going into any territories that, you know, are going to make anybody, you know, at risk or whatever, like is that, does one pose a threat to the other? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I mean, are you talking about specifically with hip hop or just like with,
or just like the scenes in general, just like, you know, music, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I actually think the opposite is happening now. I think because, you know, now China's kind of restored back to some form of normalcy. There's, again, like Alan was saying, there's starting to be this traction of new places opening up. I know in Chengdu in particular, Axis is now becoming a really great place for open format nights and different kinds of genres. I actually did a party there too before I left. I think you're really going to start seeing a lot of these incredible places start to pop up because there's so much need for it, right? People have been tucked away in lockdown for the last year. They're going to want and crave for these really incredible experiences again. And not too long ago, I know that there were a couple of boiler room sessions that happened in China. So I think we're going to start to see a lot more emphasis on people really wanting to see what's going on throughout the country musically. And I'm looking forward to see that. And I hope that I can be a part of it when things return to normal here, because, you know, we're not getting our shit together anytime soon.
Oh boy. Well, don't Alan is in Taiwan, where they just got it together like immediately. Oh, wow. This dude's been going to nightclubs for like 6 months.
Yeah, it's been, you know, there was a nice evolution with my chats with my friends overseas back in America. And it's just like at the beginning, it's like, wow, that's so cool. Wow, you're so lucky. Like, oh my God. Like, yeah. And now they're just like, don't talk to me about what you're doing. Don't tell me where you're going. I don't want to see anything on your Instagram. I blocked you on Instagram. I don't want to see it.
Yeah, it is getting harrowing over here, but things are starting to open up again, though.
Yeah.
You know, it is
We'll
what
see.
it is.
I'm rooting for y'all.
Yes, well, thank you. It's appreciated. It's
Yeah.
appreciated. Well,
I want to speak just a second to like the whole. So, of course, I live in Taiwan, and my family's Taiwanese, and my friends are all Taiwanese and all stuff. So our view on the mainland government, and I would love for Shannon to just give a blanket rejection of what I'm saying, just to keep up, you know, just be like, yo, this kid is dumb, like CCP's chill. Like, that's fine. That's fine. I understand. People need to do stuff like that. But just like, you know, we've seen it, like anytime anything gets really big or has like a big mainstream momentum, the government does tend to put out a blanket, like, okay, let's chill on this, and then puts out like a guideline or a rule. And that happened to hip hop too, not only because of Guy's shit, but so two people won that show, Hip Hop for China, Guy and this other rapper named PG1. And PG1 got really famous and like really in with like the A-list crowd. And then he had a bunch of scandals. Specifically, he stole this other like mainstream actor's girl, basically. And like people were like, oh, that's fucked up. And that mainstream actor, so here's the story. Here's the more conspiracy story, is that guy, he has a lot of government connections. So he went, he's like, I need this guy, PG1, just out of this business. I need him out. And so the government can't just like target him specifically. They don't have anything on him. So they said, okay, we're going to ban hip hop from like mainstream consumption. And meanwhile, Guy was also on like a bunch of like, he's the other winner. He has a more clean route. He's like getting married. He's going on like the singing show, The Singer. He's like performing, like, cause he's got a really, I'm getting into it, but you know, he's from Sichuan like area, and that's Sichuan dialect is very sing-songy, and his style is also very sing-songy, like almost like rural opera kind of thing. So he has a great voice for like singing. And like in his rap songs, he'll also break off into like almost rural singing for a bar and then go back to rapping, which is like great. I love that shit. But he got like immediately kicked off that show, like when the ban went into effect. And the ban was crazy if you like read it, because it was like, they made PG1 apologize, and what he apologized for, and forgive me if I'm wrong, and I would love to be corrected if this is inaccurate, but I remember him apologizing. He's like, I'm sorry, I've been acting so improperly, but this is just kind of what hip hop people do. So don't blame me, blame, and they said specifically Black culture. Yeah, it's super fucked up.
Something along
super fucked up. And so the government was like, okay, we got to ban Black culture from mainstream TV or mainstream like consumption. So it was like no rap, no tattoos, no references to rap, no references to hip hop or b-boying. It was like the blanket, like you know, we say like Muslim ban is like racist. This is like super just like, yes, the government's like, yes, this is racist, and that's right. It was like super fucked up, but it wasn't like a law. It was just a guideline, and it wasn't like a, you know, they'll say it's like a morality thing, but it's not a morality thing. It's the government wants to be the primary agent for this. If it's making money, we want to be first in line. So we're going to figure out how to monetize it. And once you monetize it correctly, then you can have it. Then all y'all can have it. We're going to be first in line. We weren't first in line. You're ahead of us. We're going to stop this. We're going to do it. And that's been happening to other things too. Like the whole like idol culture that they're importing from Korea and like Japan, that was getting real big. And so they now they have an entertainer guideline, which is like, you can't lip sync. You can't reference idols. So all the shows have to change their name from like idol shows to like production shows or like stage shows. Like there's just like a bunch of like, it's like a bunch of like just like kind of smoke and mirror shit to like, act in the guidelines. And then now the government can be like, okay, we can do idol stuff. So it's just like, yeah, like we talk about 0 to 60 of these scenes, this dance, like it might happen to dance culture. If like dance culture, if like club culture gets like so big that just like everybody knows. And they had that one show about EDM, right? They had the one EDM reality show where they had a bunch of producers go on it and like produce tracks every week. And they had like a couple like guest like judges like from abroad and all that stuff. But that didn't like really take off. So I think they're okay. But once if club culture gets to the point where it gets super scrutinized, you could see a whole list of restrictions on that. And it's just like kind of like the ebb and flow, right? It's not something that you're just like, oh, we can't do anything in China. No, it's just the ebb and flow. If you like, even Alibaba's getting their ass handed to them because they got too big. Like that's just like the thing in China. If you get too big, you just get shit on, like for a second, and then like that wave goes away, and then it can come back up in a more like allowable way.
Yeah.
It hasn't quite happened to club culture yet. It happened a little bit with, they've been really harsh on the drug scene in the clubs, like right before COVID, like all their clubs were getting just like ransacked basically by police like every weekend.
Yeah.
A lot of people who'd been touring China would like run into that problem immediately and have their tours basically canceled. They'd be kicked out of the country.
Yeah.
Drug testing was super. They would just run into the clubs and test you in the club for drugs.
Man, I had a wild story about that actually. So I think I was getting ready to go to Dada Club one night, and mine said don't go because the cops had showed up and were literally testing people on site. And I was like, oh my God, that's a thing? Jesus.
It became a thing for a second. And like there was one point where I'd go, I remember I played a show or I didn't play a show in Shanghai. I was in Shanghai as tour management, and Mark Redito played a great show. And one of the opening DJs like really loudly. This is like at one of these like new spaces in Shanghai that's like in a mall. Kind of felt like a community center, but it was cool. There's a lot of people, Shanghai. And we were outside like in front of the space where there's a lot of security cameras, and the guy was just like really loudly, he was like, oh man, that was a great set. That was so much fun. If this was 4 months ago, I would give you so many drugs. But right now I have no drugs. I'm completely clean. So I cannot give you any drugs. He'd like kind of look at the cameras and stuff. And like, yeah, he's like, yeah, I've been arrested 3 times this year. It's only April and I'm clean. I have no drugs. And I was like, I understand what you're doing, homie. Just keep talking about how you don't have any drugs. That's great. Like, I understand you just do you. You just do you. And this girl just nod and be like, yeah, no drugs, man. We get it.
Yeah. We were actually
like being extra performative about how he has no drugs because he had to, because he's just like, he'd been in the scene, he'd been doing it, he'd been in a lot of clubs, he has his name, just like everybody knows his name in the scene. And he just like had to like be very performative with how clean he was.
Yeah.
Because that's what the government had done in that recent time, scrutinizing him and his friends.
Man, I was going to say, we actually ran into a couple of similar problems. So we tried our hand a few times doing like an LGBTQ party called Lollipop. This was like 2017, like late 2017, early 2018. And the first one was really great. Like we were able to pull it off. A lot of people came. Like we had bogers, a lot of like, people kind of walking around the club scantily clad. But the second time around when we tried to do it, the poster that was promoted was a little risque, but we didn't think we were actually going to get, flagged for it. Long story short, turns out, some Chongqing government official saw the poster and was like, hell no, and told us to shut the whole thing down or else they were going to come and pretty much essentially arrest everyone. So we like never did it again after that.
I'm so unclear, but isn't like, what exactly around homosexuality is like illegal in China?
I have no clue.
There's something, right? There's something like I hear it's like, oh, it's illegal to be gay in China. Well, that's not true.
Right.
There's many, like they literally just queer bait all the time in their like main media, right? It's just like right now, it's like queer baiting is so like actually popular right now, but it's definitely illegal somewhere, right? And it's like kind of like fire. I kind of explain like it's like fire code in America. Like most Chinese laws, like fire code, you're not in trouble until you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're coming to enforce fire code because you're worried about fire. You just are worried about something else it's not illegal yet, so you're just using fire code.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's also like the whole like, you know, we talk about like the Japanese like no dancing law. The no dancing law isn't like a red or it's not a black and white thing. It's like you can't dance in a club. People dance in the clubs all the time in Japan. It's just if your club gets any sort of scrutiny and they want to shut you down, they have this law in the books that they're never going to get rid of because it's something they can just use to shut you down.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Shannon,
I mean, like all of this, what Alan is saying about these dynamics in China, how did you experience that there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying with this gray area, right? Like there's only a certain level, a window of knowledge that I have as a foreigner in China. You don't know what's going on really. You know, obviously there's that language barrier, and then, you know, you go based off of what your friends tell you, or in my case, my business partners are telling me, like, listen, this is what's going on socially and politically. You gotta tread lightly, you know, and you know, once they started telling me about the censorship and especially with the tattoos and stuff, I was like, okay, maybe we really need to tone down on this a bit because, you know, I like my job here. I love my level of freedom here as a foreigner. You know, I would never want to do anything to overstep my boundary or disrespect the culture in any kind of way. And, you know, going into it initially, like starting the hip hop club, I was almost kind of fearful of that because, you know, there's a certain level of stigmatism and stereotypes that often go on in American hip hop culture. And I was starting to see a little inkling of some of those things in Chongqing, you know, like some guys using the N-word or, you know, like just exhibiting some things that they were seeing going on in exhibiting some of the things that they were seeing going on in American hip hop culture. And I was like, okay, this is not what I want. This is not what I want this to be about. I wanted Cream to really be about this place where we could cross cultural exchange in a way that, you know, was going to help, so to speak, that level of misunderstanding. So in a way, it was, I almost say maybe it was like a good time that we stopped when we did, because I just didn't know what was going to happen. You know, I didn't know if there was going to be repercussions. Luckily for us, though, going back to what you were saying about establishing that relationship with the police, we had, there's a term in Chinese called one.She, which is kind of like, you know, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, you take care of me, I take care of you. And luckily, you know, my business partners at the time, we had some of that going on with the local police department. So, you know, there'd be times where we might have gotten into a little bit of a disagreement with them, but they were essentially looking out for us as long as we didn't really overstep our boundaries. So yeah, I'm not sure how that level of our relationship would have carried over if we kept going on with the hip hop club, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, no, I know the feeling of like feeling like it's good when something ended when it did. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, things can go majorly wrong. It's also a really weird thing as a space operator to be implicated in a relationship with the police. Because the thing is that, like, when I say a relationship with the police, I don't mean like I'm friends with these people. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like if you operate a space in a neighborhood in New York, you just do have a relationship with the police. Do you know what I mean? It's not like you could elect not to have that relationship. That would just be having a really bad and confrontational and negative relationship. You know what I mean? But like, you can't opt out of it. They're there, they're riding around, they're checking you out. And if you're like, the worst thing that you can do ultimately for everybody in the club, and this is especially important when you're serving populations who are historically targeted by the police, the worst thing you can do is seem shifty and avoidant and like you're ducking the police, because then they want to come in. Do you know what I mean? But it's like an awkward thing, and it's an awkward time to have that relationship, because the police are rightfully under so much scrutiny. And as a person, not as a space operator, I share all of those sentiments. Do you know what I mean? But as a space operator, you're implicated in this relationship that you just have no choice but to sustain. And it's a weird part of the job, that's for sure. Anyhow, whoa, this has been, we got on some like deep dive, like late in the conversation. That was sick.
It's been awesome. Yeah, I loved it.
Cool. Well, we've been going for a hot second. This has been good. Does anybody have any closing statements or arguments? Any closing arguments?
No, I mean, I'm really grateful. I'm grateful for this 5-year journey, and I really hope that I can keep it going. Like, again, like when things do return to normal, I hope to be like traveling back and forth and, organizing again. I think there's just something so incredible about being able to exchange on a level musically and, personally with all these incredible people that I've been meeting. And so now my excitement is going to come from possibly getting people from New York to go over to China and doing multi-city tours. So that's something I'm really, really looking forward to making happen.
Mm-hmm. And are you going to bring the organizing work that you do to New York? You going to work in that capacity in New York?
I hope so. It's just about like getting out and meeting people now, because I've been away for so long. So I'm really happy to like start meeting people,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, God, what a weird time to get trapped in New York.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we have met, and yeah, if you want, like, once we're out and about and things are happening, like, obviously shout at Hollow, like, we'll hold you down. Yeah, awesome. And thank you so much for coming on Place of Assembly.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. This has been awesome.
Yeah, and Alan, expert co-hosting. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, I'm just here to like say things that I've heard and hope they get blowed up in my face. That's like my, like, please, like, that's exactly what I'm here for. So it was great finally like chatting with you, Shannon. Like, really good, really, really great.
Yeah, nice meeting you.
Really wonderful to hear about all this.
Cool. Well, Alan, you have a good day. Shannon, you have a good night. And peace and thanks to both of y'all for being here.
Yeah, been a pleasure.
All right. Peace. Whoa. Deep cuts, man. That was a deep dive. DJ Shannon. So many fascinating moments in that conversation. Hearing about the energy that's been arising in Chengdu, NASA, the 20-story office building with 3 clubs in it.
I'm really glad we got to talk about Poly Center. That space was so crazy to me when we went up there.
Yeah,
there's really nothing like this in the world.
Yeah. No, it was a sick conversation, and I actually didn't know going into it that she actually ran a club in China.
Yeah.
That is wild, but like a fascinating person. And thank you for all of your feedback and insights, man. And thanks for your help. This is the end of a 3-part series, 2 on mainland China, 1 on Hong Kong. And thanks for all your help with the series. And
yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's been fun exploring these and getting, a lot of these are like first time, like having a real deep conversation with people about these things myself. So being able to like kind of ask a lot of these questions and confirm a lot of these like not theories, but like rumors, I guess I've heard. It's like really cool, really, really cool.
Yeah, man, that's what it's about, man. Place of assembly, like chopping it up, deep dives. All right, sick. Well, Alan, we'll be in touch. Thanks for being on the pod, and I'll catch you later.
Yeah, cheers.
All right, man.